It is not a typical campaign. I ran Chrétien's war rooms. I've run war rooms at the provincial level. I've done a lot of the work. Like superficially, you've got people going around the country in their buses and their planes, and you got the media waiting for them, and you got crowds, and that's the normal kind of stuff. What's different is, the anxiety that the country's got about the future and this existential threat. We've got the most powerful person on earth saying that he wants to use economic force against us. He wants to make us the 51st state. He mocks our leaders. He mocks our people. He mocks our country. Like that stuff's never happened before, ever. And it has completely reordered our politics. And shortly, unfortunately, it's going to reorder our economy as well.
Welcome to Municipal Affairs, Canada Votes 2025. The second week of the 45th general election has come to a close, and with only a few short weeks until voters head to the polls on Monday, April 28th, the landscape is all over the map. Now, to help us break down the second week of this race, we are joined today by political commentator, Toronto Sun Columnist, and former Liberal advisor to Jean Chretien, Mr. Warren Kinsella. Warren is a leading expert on all things Canadian politics from coast to coast to coast. Today, we'll explore the challenges each party is facing with turfing of candidates at the last minute, the Trump tariffs, the crowd sizes, and where the parties are heading into the last full week before those critical election debates. So stay with us as we dive into the dynamics of this pivotal election right here on Municipal Affairs, Canada Votes 2025. Across Canada, our cities, towns, villages, and rural communities are alive with stories waiting to be told. Stories of innovation and economic development, resilience in the face of the housing challenges, and the financial hurdles municipalities overcome every day. At the Cross Border Network, we bring these stories to life. From coast to coast to coast, we're connecting Canadians to the issues shaping our communities and showcasing the people working tirelessly to make them thrive. With your support, we can expand our reach, amplify more voices, and shine a light on the challenges and triumphs of municipal life. For as little as $3.99 a month, you can help us grow and continue sharing the stories that matter most. Join us today and be part of this important mission. Together, we can tell more stories, build stronger communities, and make a real difference. Support the Cross Border Network now. Visit www.crossborderinterviews.ca today. Warren, thank you so much for sitting down with me and talking about the week two of election 45. From your standpoint as a political observer from coast to coast to coast, how did election 45 week two go for you?
Well, there's the remains of a lot of candidates littering the landscape. The Tories lost, I don't know, 4 or 5 candidates. The Liberals lost a couple. So it was noteworthy for that. It was noteworthy for, I think, Mark Carney, the Liberal leader, continues to play peekaboo a bit with the media. Pierre Poilievre is starting to modulate his tone a little bit. I saw him speak to a Bay Street crowd this week. But I don't think any of it matters. I think the elephant in the room continues to be Donald Trump. And he's affecting the way in which Canadians look at politics, and he's affecting the way in which they're making their political choices.
So I just want to pick up on the Donald Trump factor of this all, because this week was the week that the quote unquote Liberation Day came into effect. But from an outsider's perspective, Canada wasn't the main target, but there were still tariffs put on. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith seems to be doing a victory lap that oil and gas was not on the tariff list, but manufacturing, auto sector, southwestern Ontario was hit hard by these tariffs. How does this impact the week three of the campaign where everyone now is going to be focusing on Ontario?
Well, this week was always going to be a problem for Poilievre because, he's not the government. and it's hard to break through with his prescription for dealing with these insane tariffs, which took 6 trillion with a T, $6 trillion in value off of the stock market this week. It's really hard to think of anything that he said because necessarily, understandably, everybody's paying attention to the government response, and the government happens to be led by Mark Carney. But any Canadian, and Danielle Smith included, she's still a Canadian, notwithstanding the way she behaves, is they're dreaming in Technicolor if they think that even a 10% tariff isn't going to affect their lives and what's going to be happening to their lives in the coming weeks and months. And the thing, I've campaigned, as you know, for Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And so I volunteered for the Democrats in the States 3 times against Donald Trump. And the one thing I've learned about this guy is he's predictably unpredictable. So, we may have dodged in some sectors a 25% tariff this week, but who's to say what he's promised is coming in May isn't going to make things worse for us then and for the Mexicans. So it doesn't matter what Trump says. It's what matters is what he does. And we're not out of the woods yet, not by a long shot.
There was a lot of talk earlier this week about Poilievre's messaging around the Trump factor of this campaign. In the last few days, were we chatting on April 5th? It seems like the Conservatives have pivoted a little bit to attacking Donald Trump, president, a little bit more. From your perspective, is this enough? And do you think that the Conservatives can turn it around? Because the polls seem to indicate the gap is getting larger.
It's too late, and the gap is getting larger because it's too late. For 2 years, he went around the country saying Canada is broken, which more or less is the message that Donald Trump has had about us. For 2 years, he cavorted with the convoy lunatics and railed against the World Economic Forum and was angry about vaccine mandates. And basically, he did everything that Donald Trump did in all but name. And, now he's had an 11th hour conversion to a different point of view, but it's too late. The Liberal Party got there first, and so he's not believable when he tries to depict himself as the opponent of Donald Trump. And that's not just the view of liberals, that's obviously the view of New Democrats and the Bloc Québécois as well, because their vote is cratered and a lot of their core has stampeded over to the liberal option. So Trump is, there's things that have assisted the liberals for sure. Trudeau leaving greatly assisted them. Carney's demeanor is, this kind of, quite frankly, bland, boring banker. People, I think, feel like they need that at this time of great anxiety. But the main reason why the Conservatives are losing, and have lost a 30-point lead in a matter of 6 weeks, I think it was. 30 points gone 6 weeks. That's never happened in Canadian history before. The main reason that's happened is Donald Trump. Canadians are angry, they're afraid, they're anxious, they're uncertain about the future, and they just do not trust Poilievre to be the guy to map out, the way we get through the next few years.
Are we in a typical campaign? Because traditionally, and I've watched numerous campaigns in my time, and I've been parts of many in Ontario, traditionally the first 2 weeks people don't pay attention. It isn't until after the debates where people start tuning in. Could we see that gap close, or this Trump factor has basically already ingrained into people's minds of who they're going to vote for or who they're not going to vote for?
It is not a typical campaign. I ran Chrétien's war rooms. I've run war rooms at the provincial level. I've done a lot of the work. Like, superficially, you've got people going around the country in their buses and their planes, and you got the media waiting for them, and you got crowds. and that's the normal kind of stuff. What's different is, the anxiety that the country's got about the future and this existential threat. We got the most powerful person on earth saying that he wants to use economic force against us. He wants to make us the 51st state. He mocks our leaders. He mocks our people. He mocks our country. Like that stuff's never happened before, ever. And it has completely reordered our politics. And shortly, unfortunately, it's going to reorder our economy as well. So, no, all the normal rules don't apply. Like it just, think back. The start of the year, the Conservative Party of Canada was 30 points ahead of the Liberal Party. Like they were heading towards one of the biggest majorities in Canadian history. Now the table is flipped because of Trump, and it's the Liberal Party who's got as much as a 10-point lead over the Conservatives. Like it's extraordinary. All the stuff that's happening, none of this has happened before.
I was in Saskatchewan just last month speaking to some conservatives at a Saskatchewan Association of Rural Municipalities convention, and they were angry that Trudeau is no longer the prime minister because they considered him as the easy win. And they kind of alluded to the fact that they understand that this was not going to be their election now that Carney is in and Trump has made a factor. And that's diehard conservatives talking. Was this campaign kind of foreseen prior to the election even being called with all these external factors going on?
No, I don't think anybody foresaw Trump doing what he's done. He's well on his way to, um, you know, uh, who made the prognostication that the United States is heading towards a recession. So obviously, so too will the world. And I've seen serious economists saying we're heading for a depression. So nobody foresaw any of that. But there were some people, and I was one of them, and I'm still owed a lot of lunches and dinners because the bets I made. I said the Trudeau was going to leave. And I have friends in Poilievre's circle. They're really smart people. They're good people. And they said, no, you're wrong. And I said, well, why am I wrong? And they said, well, he's a narcissist. And I said, well, that's precisely why he's leaving. He doesn't want to take the loss. He doesn't want his legacy to be the Liberal Party reduced to third place or worse. He's going to go. And they didn't have a plan B. They did not prepare for the change. When I was running Chretien's War Room in 92, 93, we figured Brian Mulroney was going to leave. He wasn't going to stick around for the loss. So I had in my war room, every person, every guy and gal had a responsibility for, I was in charge of Kim Campbell, another guy has Jean Chretien, somebody else had Perrin Beatty. We were ready, whoever they picked. And you can tell the Conservative Party was not ready. They had actually convinced themselves that they, were just going to have to slow walk to a massive victory and Trudeau was going to stick around. And when he left and everything started to move quickly, they still couldn't accept the reality. They still were talking about axing the carbon tax, and they were, in effect, they were fighting the last war. And, and now they're trying to make up for that mistake. But like I say, it's too late. We're heading into the third week of the campaign. At this point, we're days away from the advanced polls opening.
Yeah.
Where, people have, for the most part, already, my experience is in the second week, most people have made their decision about which way they're going to go. So it feels like it's all over. The only wild card at this point, I would say, is the debates. Carney is obviously not as good a debater as Poilievre. But Mulcair was a better debater than Harper and Trudeau, and he still got clobbered, So being a great debater, being aggressive, may not be what people want. So we'll see. The debates are going to be, I think, important, but they may not change the outcome.
You talked about the crowd sizes at some of these rallies that candidates are holding, and by estimations by what social media has said that the crowd sizes at the Polyev campaigns are huge and they're not seen in any other previous campaign. What do you take into the fact that people want to show up and see him talk? Because there's a narrative in the media that says that these are just people wanting to hear him talk and it's not going to translate to votes. But there's got to be something going on in the conservative war room that gives them hope that they could potentially pull this out, isn't there?
Yeah, for sure. And, they are very impressive pictures, these huge rallies he's having right across the country, including in places where the Conservative Party traditionally has not had strength. And Carney's had rallies, but, visually they haven't been as impressive. So why is it that Mark Carney's ahead in the polls? Well, the reality is this. In Canada, in the United States, and in Europe, self-described progressives numerically are always more. There's more people who describe themselves as progressives, on the center left. But they're lazy. They're a lazy voter, and it's hard to get them out. Whereas conservatives, particularly Polyev conservatives, are hardcore, and they're really committed to their choice. But numerically, there's fewer of them.
Yeah.
And so, right now, my former colleague, Greg Lyle, who's from BC, he runs a fine polling firm called the Innovative Research Group, and he had a poll out yesterday showing the Conservatives ahead by 1 point. And I had Conservatives saying to me, see, we're creeping ahead. And I was like, boys and girls, you're still losing. Like Scheer and O'Toole finished the election in 2019 and 2021, 1 point ahead, but Trudeau still won the election. And it's because the number that the Conservatives are seeing and drawing comfort from is distorted by the fact that in Alberta and Saskatchewan, they've got excess vote, whereas the Liberal vote is much more efficient and it's spread out in a way that results in a significant number of seats. So the Conservatives are still losing. The rallies look great, but they're drawing out their own people. They need to draw in new people, and they're not doing that.
This is the first election that I can recall that the parties are doing their own official opposition research, with so many candidates being turfed from the ballot or turfed from the party ballot in this week. I think the final number this week was 4 for the Conservatives, 3 or 2 from the Liberals. Are we expecting this to get nastier as things go on? Because as of Monday, parties can no longer drop candidates from the ballot. So is this parties trying to clean house before that date, or are we expecting this to get worse?
Oh yeah, no, it's going to get nastier, and guys like me love it. So, yeah, you have in the social media era, people say stupid things, at 2 o'clock in the morning or after they've had a couple road pops, and they say stupid things online. So that's now a feature of our politics all the time. So the question you've gone in a war room, like everybody's sitting on this stuff. So a bunch of them, half a dozen of them, were booted off of their party slates this week. But there's others that are still there. I guarantee you there are others. And what the parties are doing is waiting until it's too late to kick them off the ballot, so that they can, keep that unsatisfactory candidate on the ballot. And so there's some you want to get rid of at the front end, and there's some you wait to cause trouble for the other side. So yeah, there's going to be more of them.
So can I just interject there for a second? Because
Yeah.
in the world of Donald Trump, where that man can say whatever he wants and we don't blink an eye anymore, do the social media gaffes from 2015, and I'll be the first to admit, and I'll just put this on the record, I was one of those candidates. I did things in the past that came up and bit me in the behind during the 2015 campaign, but it seems like the down south, no matter what you say anymore, you basically can get elected to whatever office you want. Why are Canadians a little bit more harder on their candidates than Americans?
Well, because we're not Americans, and we are different, as we keep saying to Donald Trump and to his MAGA army, which is dwindling in size. Like, we're not Americans, and so we approach public service and our politics differently. And I think we do have, like, I know there's people who are conservatives who don't like Mark Carney, and there's liberals who don't like Pierre Poilievre. But at the end of the day, if you are being objective and you look at their policy statements and where they are on the issues, there's not a significant difference between those two men. Like there really isn't. What's extraordinary about the United States of America since 2016, and I think it's a confluence of factors, it's social media, it's Fox News, it's quite frankly the literacy rate in the United States. All of those things have combined to produce this abomination, which is Donald Trump. And we've not seen the likes of him since Barry Goldwater, in 1964 in the United States. But even by that comparison, Goldwater was quite educated and in some cases restrained. Trump is an anomaly. Something like this has not happened before. And of course, a lot of us are hoping that something like this never happens again.
Just cautious of time here, and I have a few areas I want to talk about quickly, and that is the collapse of the NDP. This I am hearing from people in the NDP camp here in Alberta and across Western Canada that this could be the demise of the NDP this election. You're in sort of that downtown Toronto core, but you are also based in the Bay of Quinte, my old stomping ground.
Mhm.
What do you see as the NDP factor in this campaign, or are they completely gone from Jagmeet Singh and they're now backing Mark Carney to stop a Pierre Poilievre government?
They're in huge trouble.
Yeah.
They are in massive trouble. And, I've seen some credible polling showing them down to as little as 7 and 8%. What does that mean to be in single digits like that? That means Jagmeet Singh's going to lose his seat. Right now, he's actually in fourth place in that riding, according to some estimates that I've seen. If they're at 7 percentage points, all they're going to keep is Winnipeg Center. Like it's over. It's lights out for this election cycle. Will they come back? Obviously, they will come back. My view is always nothing ever dies in politics. Everybody pronounced the obituary of the British Columbia NDP, and now they're in their second term as a government. So, but yeah, they're being punished. I think in part because they propped up Justin Trudeau, who was a very unpopular politician. But the main reason is people are concerned about Trump, and they're looking for the politician who can deal with Trump. And whether they're New Democrats, like even the Bloc Québécois, who favor a separate Quebec, why are they all supporting the Liberal Party, which is a Federalist Party? Well, because separatists and nationalists in the party, the province of Quebec, know that the French language and culture is going to be eliminated if we become the 51st state. There's going to be no tolerance for bilingualism or biculturalism. So you've even got separatists indicating their support for the Liberal Party. That's why I said to you a couple minutes ago, this has never happened before. Like we're in like this is like Dorothy. We're not in Kansas anymore. This is completely different. And the reason, is two words for it: Donald Trump.
Is this the 2014 Ontario election playing out? Because by all accounts, 2011, Dalton McGuinty won a minority government. It was his last term. And then polls were predicting that Tim Hudak was going to come in and basically run the next election in 2014 and become the next premier of Ontario. And that's what's happening nationally. Or can we take some history lessons of what's happening Canadian-wise right now with what happened in Ontario in 2014?
I don't think so. I think
Okay.
the better Ontario lesson is 2025, where Doug Ford, who is a progressive conservative, like that's a useful contrast actually to answer your question. Doug Ford and Pierre Poilievre both lead conservative parties. Doug Ford and Pierre Poilievre have always had traditionally conservative points of view. They've got troops who are loyal to them. Why did one win a third majority government? Why did one make history? And why is the other one now just weeks away from possibly, never working in politics again? It's because of the way they've addressed the Trump issue. So that's why I think 2025 is the best indicator. Like the federal liberals watched very carefully what Doug Ford was doing, and they saw what the result was, when he came out foursquare against Trump and, was going on CNN and going on Fox News to make the case for Ontario and by extension Canada. They're doing the same thing. Carney's got a different style than Doug does, but that's the campaign they're running. The federal Liberals are running the Doug Ford campaign. I ran McGuinty's War Room in our third victory, and for sure we had Tim Hudak railing against foreigners, and there were some other stupid things the Conservatives did. But this external threat, this existential threat, it didn't exist that year. It exists this year.
So we are heading into week 3 of this campaign, and there is going to be a lot of attention focused on the top 2 leaders, the Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre. What are you looking for in this week? Is it going to be a down week because there's going to be a lot of debate prep going on, or what are you expecting to see the party leaders do?
Yeah, it's a lot of debate prep, and those, that takes up quite a few days. The Liberals are probably going to spend more time at it than Poilievre. Poilievre is an excellent debater. He's really good at the cut and thrust of the House of Commons and parliamentary committees, and Carney isn't. Carney was beaten in the 2 Liberal leadership debates by a young MP, Karina Gold. She clobbered him. And, really, he came fourth in most of those debates. So I think that the Liberals probably have some anxiety about how he's going to do. I've gotten prime ministers ready for those debates. It depends how many people's on the stage. When we were getting Chretien ready for his last debate in 2000, it was a pretty crowded stage. You had conservatives up there and New Democrats and separatists. And so as a consequence, they were all yelling at him. And the advice, I gave him is, well, just let them yell at you. Just look like a prime minister and sit back. Canadians don't like yelling. They don't like that kind of stuff on TV. And that's the danger for Poilievre in the debates, is that he gets shouty and he gets angry and therefore Trumpy. And Carney looks like a prime minister in contrast.
What is there any big story that you're going to be following this week as well, as besides the debate prep? I know the tariff threat is still ongoing because we do not know what Donald Trump is going to do today, tomorrow, if not next week. It all depends on how he slept, it seems like, that night before. But is there a news story that you're going to be watching that could impact this race a little bit?
Yeah, the tariffs. Like, the story's not over. He only dropped this thing on Thursday and Friday, and the markets have lost nearly $7 trillion in value.
Yeah.
It's the biggest economic collapse since the global fiscal crisis in 2008. And the only thing that compares to it before that is the Great Depression. So I don't know why people think that, okay, that's it, and people are going to adjust. They're not going to adjust. Like this shit that we went through in a 48-hour period, it's going to continue next week and the week after that and the week after that. As long as this idiot sticks with this insane economic policy, and I hesitate to call it a policy, that's going to be the only story. It doesn't matter what else happens, debate prep or what have you. The story is the world is on the precipice of a depression. And everybody's being measured according to how they respond to that.
Do you think, because there's been pushback in the United States, we saw Rand Paul and Mitch McConnell come out, and Lisa Murkowski, senators from across the states, come out and say they just don't want this. Do you think that this is going to be talked about as much as you think it's going to be? Because it seems like there's already getting some pushback in the states from these tariffs.
Sorry, I don't understand the question. Do I think that
Do you think the policy is going to still stay in place? Because it seems
I don't
like
know.
the Republicans are starting to find their voice in this fight against these tariffs because
No,
they're
I
seeing the
see.
walls.
Yeah, no, the Republicans aren't a political party anymore. They're a cult, and their cult leader is Donald Trump. So no, like I don't know. I'm not a psychologist. Like I don't, I've been involved in 3 campaigns against the guy in the United States. And like I said, he's completely unpredictable. God knows what he's going to do. He tanked the world's economy on Thursday and he went golfing on Friday. So like, I have no idea what he's going to do. All I know is people smarter than me who know economics are saying if he sticks to this for another week or so, we will not be able to recover around the world, not just in the United States, everywhere. There will be no recovery from this because of the damage that will have been done. So, hold on to your hats. It's going to get pretty crazy.
It certainly will. Warren, I want to thank you so much for the bottom of my heart for sitting down and chatting with me. It's always a pleasure to pick your mind and see what's going on federally and get to talk to someone who's been in the war rooms and been on the front lines of these campaigns. So thank you so much.
It's always a pleasure to be on the Cross Border Network.
Thank you so much for tuning in for another episode of Municipal Affairs Canada Votes 2025. Now, if you've enjoyed today's conversation and gained some valuable insights, be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platforms or on YouTube. Now, if you can, your support means the world to us. So if you can, share this episode with your friends, your family, and yes, even your community, and help keep the conversation going. To learn more about the communities and the people we feature on this show, head over to our website at crossborderinterviews.ca. All the links that we mentioned in these shows are there. Until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and we'll be back with a brand new episode of Municipal Affairs Canada Votes 2025 soon. Till then, everyone.